Right, everybody see it full screen, hopefully? Beautiful, okay. So as Kara said, I'm Joanna Prescott. I'm the co-founder of the Rochester chapter of the Gravel Collective. And I am going to tell you all how we host inclusive group rides. And just a caveat, everybody tends to do group rides a little bit differently. This is just what we found works for us. And I'm always open to suggestions and thoughts. If you've got some great ideas, I'm always happy to hear it. I just want to make things better for everybody so everybody has a great ride. So, also, if you hear any weird noises in the background, that's my dog. He's a 10-month-old lab and he's still figuring out how Zoom works. So starting off, who am I? I am a late in life cyclist. I grew up riding bikes, but very casually. I got into running a few years ago, had an IT band injury, got into cycling because it was a little bit easier, a little less pressure on my legs, and I've kind of stuck with it. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a cyclist, I'm a dog mom, and I'm a geek by trade. I am a systems administrator for servers and background stuff for a local Institute of Technology. And I'm very proud to say that we had a survey a few months ago on our campus, and over 1/3 of our student population identifies as something other than cis and straight. And I am really proud to work there in a place that is so welcoming and people feel that they can be themselves. My favorite chamois butter is Ultra Bomb for those long rides. It's really fantastic. And my favorite ride snack is Reese's peanut butter eggs because the ratio to peanut butter and chocolate is perfect. Okay. So just a quick rundown of what is inclusion. Inclusion means different things to different people. But the dictionary defines it as the action or state of including or being included within a group or structure and providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized. Us specifically, the Gravel Collective, we welcome all cyclists of all abilities, backgrounds. We don't care what bike you have. We don't care if you show up in full spandex or not. And we focus on historically excluded groups such as WTFNB, BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, and para-athletes. And our goal is to reduce barriers and make cycling more accessible and fun for everybody. And in the meantime, make a safe, uplifting environment. Okay, so what makes a good ride? The basics that are slightly more tangible, that don't necessarily have to do with inclusion, but kind of do. Clear communication. All of our rides have information on where we're meeting, how long the ride is, what the pace looks like, and I try to define that as miles per hour versus saying something is a chill pace. I have friends who think a chill pace is 10 miles per hour. I have friends who think a chill pace is 18 miles per hour. So when you say chill, make sure people know what chill means. We always say if a ride is no drop, it is no drop. We have sweepers, we have people with technical abilities to help out with flats and mechanicals. We have ride leaders who are very familiar with the routes. Often we scout the route ahead of time. In the summer, we have a lot of trail construction here. We've run into a lot of fallen trees after storms where we'd had to reroute. Sometimes routes aren't as accessible as we think they might be for some of our paracyclist members. Stuff like that, telling people what type of bike would work for that ride. Not every bike can do every ride, and you don't want someone showing up to a road ride or to a gravel ride on a road bike with skinny tires if you know that it's going to be rocky for half of that ride. It's not going to be fun. They're not going to want to come back. Not very inclusive, right? We also try to provide a checklist for everybody. We have one pinned on our Instagram. This has got the basics, bring your sunscreen, bring your water, bring some snacks, bring your flat kit. If people have questions, make them comfortable to ask. Like maybe some people don't know what a flat kit is. That's a good educational opportunity. We always require a helmet and often lights. I always carry an extra red blinky light because I think that's pretty important as far as safety goes. Not everybody has a light. And just be prepared as a ride leader or as a sweeper to have a little bit of extra equipment. I always carry a few extra snacks. I always carry an extra tube, stuff like that. Okay, now the
Joanna,
actual
I just
inclusion.
want to hop in there really quick. And
Yeah, sure.
there's one piece of feedback that a lot of times we hear when we're putting on rides or people ask us how to host a group ride. I think what you're doing just in the pure communication stage, like it is not that difficult. Like I love your example here on that post, how easy that is to just simply state, this is the pace, 12 miles an hour, no drop, bring a helmet, a light, download the route, right? Like that is how simple it is. When we talk about like, how do we make a ride inclusive? Sometimes it can feel like, oh, I don't know how to, or I don't know where to start. It can be just as simple as this post that Joanna has here on the left or on their Instagram page.
And kind of touching on that, we use multiple ways of communication for our routes. We have a lot of folks who are only on Facebook. We have a lot of folks who only use Instagram. We're starting up a Discord server for chatting for folks who don't want to use social media. I've even had people just say, can you just text me if there's a ride coming up? Thankfully, that's only 2 people, so I don't have to really keep track of a texting list, but we do have a couple of local groups that do use a text mailing list that sends out every time they update their ride calendar. It sends out a text to their text listing. So we'll be utilizing that probably starting in the spring. It's a little bit more technical than social media stuff, and I just have to make the time to get in there. I'm one of those folks, yes, I do IT for a living. At 5 o'clock, I close my computer and I try really hard not to touch it. So there are a lot of options out there for keeping communication open. And as far as routes go, Ride with GPS or Komoot, those are, really fantastic ride planning pieces of software, or Strava. We also have a Strava group that we can send invites in as well. So, all right, so this is the meaty bits of what makes a ride inclusive. Okay, we talked about what makes a good group ride. This is what you can do to make a ride feel safe and comfortable for those marginalized groups. I always tell people, be welcoming. I am often the loudest person in the room. I know my sister joined, she can tell you that. We grew up in an Italian family. You have to be loud to be heard. I can project my voice, and at the start of every ride, I introduce myself. I use my pronouns. I point out who our ride leaders are, who our sweepers are. If we have anybody mid-pack who are more experienced, if we have people who are more technical, if you have mechanical, I point them out. You want this ride, depending on the ride, I always start with, the most basic of rides. You want everybody to come back again, right? You want the slowest rider to not feel like the slowest rider. You want the least experienced rider to not feel like a total beginner and feel like they're holding the group up. You want them to come back. You want them to tell their friends, hey, I had a great time on this ride. I felt really welcomed, even though I was on a hybrid bike that's 20 years old. Okay. Avoid using harmful language. You don't want to use anything that could be ableist, racist, or anything that would make somebody not feel like they can be themselves. Be visibly inclusive. If anybody has seen our Gravel Collective kits, we have the progressive pride flag right on the sleeve. I cannot tell you how many times people have stopped me on rides and said, thank you so much for being visible. I feel like I'm safe riding with you. These ride wristbands that, if any of you have joined one of the Chamois Butt'r rides, this is from Molly Cameron's ride group. This is a very visible indicator that you stand for trans rights and trans athletes. I have been stopped so many times saying, where can I get me one of those? It's just helpful. It's you saying, hey, listen, you're safe with me. It's okay. Ask for consent when taking photos or giving advice. If we do a group photo, I always say, is everybody okay with me taking your photo? Not everybody wants to be on the internet. Not everybody wants to be seen by other folks as riding with an inclusive group if they're not out or if they're just not comfortable. Giving advice. This is a big one for me. I do not enjoy unsolicited advice. It happens to me all the time in my career. It happens to me all the time on bike rides. And it's not a good situation. You feel uncomfortable. So my big thing is saying, hey, I have some suggestions. Would you like to hear them? Or, hey, I've struggled with descending down a hill before too. Would you like to hear what's worked for me? Stuff like that. Using accessible routes and locations. If you have a lot of riders who you know are coming from the city and may not have transportation for their bicycle, you don't want to meet out in the middle of nowhere in the suburbs if they can't get there. This kind of ties into our supporting others tab up there. If you have folks who are comfortable carpooling, who have bike racks, I have a 2-bike bike rack. It is often just me and my bike. My boyfriend has a 4-bike rack. We always offer in our groups, if anybody needs a ride with their bike, we can take you. It makes it more accessible to everybody. Make sure you're using routes that are accessible to paracyclists. If a route is not accessible, please be clear about that, because it is incredibly uncomfortable to say, hey, this ride is not going to work for you and your bike. I've had people show up on trikes. I've had people show up on recumbents, and thankfully those routes have been safe for those types of bikes. That's not always the case in public rides. Honoring and acknowledging the land that you're riding on. We are riding on stolen land all over the United States and elsewhere. If you're doing a lot more traveling than I am, acknowledge that. We personally ride on the land of the Haudenosaunee, and there are several tribes that make that up. It is very important to me to acknowledge the indigenous folks who lived here long before we did. Being open to suggestions. If someone says, hey, you said this thing, I was kind of uncomfortable, or hey, maybe next time get my pronouns right, acknowledge that and move on, do better next time. If someone says, hey, this ride was a little bit fast for me, can you slow it down? Make sure that next time you're very clear about the pace. If it's something where it's going to be a faster paced ride, be clear about that. Another thing that we tend to do a lot of in this area, we collaborate a lot with local groups. We have several smaller groups that have the same mission ideas that we have about inclusion. We have a local chapter of the Radical Adventure Riders that we've ridden with multiple times. That's them down there. We actually did a fundraising ride for the Southern Tier AIDS program. It was a 100-mile ride around one of our beautiful Finger Lakes. We teamed up with the Radical Adventure Riders of Ithaca, had an absolute blast, raised money, and they come to Rochester now for some of our rides. We go to Ithaca for some of their rides. That's an hour's drive. It's a big deal to me that folks want to drive an hour to come and ride with my crew. That means that we're doing things pretty okay. Also, supporting queer, BIPOC, and WTFNB owned local businesses during rides and events. I have been reaching out to a lot of local businesses. There are a couple of bars and breweries. There is a really lovely inclusive coffee shop, and a couple of women-owned bakeries that we will be utilizing for future rides. You really want to support the community that you're trying to include. That makes you're helping them out, they're helping you out. It's this nice, really mutual thing. Let's see. Oh, one other thing too. Loaner bikes in a gear library. If that is something that you have the possibility of doing, the Radical Adventure Riders have a gear library for a lot of their bike packing. I think that is absolutely fabulous. Not everybody wants to spend hundreds of dollars on bike packing equipment and bags if they're going to try it out once and not like it anymore. I have a couple of bikes that I have no problem letting somebody borrow that are perfectly capable of gravel rides. And again, this presentation has been very gravel centric because that's what we do, but it's the same basic idea for road rides, mountain biking, any of that. Just a canal ride to hit up a couple of breweries or a couple of coffee shops, same deal, same basic ideas. I always like to show my work, provide resources that I've used. There are a whole lot of folks who have been doing this much longer than I have, and they do a fantastic job of it. The ride group that was started by Molly Cameron is fantastic. Queer Gravel, Abby Robbins, I met them at Unbound 3 years ago before they got big. absolutely amazing resource on their website. The Venture Out Project, it is not cycling specific, but it is outdoor specific. There are tons of resources on their website, right down to, pronouns and language, safe communities and spaces, different hiking groups, cycling groups, all sorts of outdoors things. I also felt it was important to list some other groups that are inclusive cycling groups. The Ride for Racial Justice, All Bodies on Bikes. All Bodies on Bikes is Marley Blonsky's group. All Bikes, All Sizes, All Folks. Dirtbound Cycling is Annika Wade's group that focuses on cycling for all, I believe specifically para athletes, which is fantastic. A lot of mountain biking, absolutely beautiful. I know they're down there doing some stuff in Bentonville. I've been watching Instagram, very jealous, and I'm not even a mountain biker, so that's pretty cool. Radical Adventure Riders, I've mentioned them. Their website is also a fantastic resource. Melon and Base Miles, Black Girls Do Bike, and the Big Heat Cycling are also fantastic groups. These are the big ones that I could think of off the top of my head that I have personally interacted with. Nearly every city has been building up bike groups, larger cities mostly. If you're interested in a cycling group, look around. There might be Facebook groups for you, or start a chapter. We are always looking for more chapters for the Gravel Collective. Same thing with Radical Adventure Riders, All Bodies on Bikes. People that want to run something and do something good is always something that we need out there. And I believe that is the end of my slides. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. And please, please, please give me feedback. I hope you learned something from me. And more importantly, I want to learn something from y'all, because that's what this is all about. We all just want to ride bikes and have a good time and be comfortable doing it.
Thanks so much, Joanna. I wanted to introduce Beckie Irvin, our ambassador coordinator, to kind of moderate chat and maybe ask some questions. I think this is a great starting off point. When we say inclusive, that's a big umbrella. There's a lot of pieces you can do, but I do think it's really important we remember when we first picked up a bike and went to a group ride, there's a lot of things that Joanna talked about or shown in examples that are really easy ways for us to start. So yeah, Beckie, I'll let you take it over and we can have a few minutes to chat before we hop off.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Joanna. I really love watching Rochester Gravel Collective and all that y'all are doing. As Kara said, my name is Beckie Irvin. I use she, her pronouns, and I manage the athletes and ambassadors for Chamois Butt'r. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. And at this time, if folks have any questions, we'd love to take a few minutes for Q&A.
Okay, Beckie, I have a question for you. If I am trying to stock up my personal gear library, host a group ride, have hot chocolate in the square of my local town, how can I utilize you as a resource to do that for some of these ambassadors?
Great question. I am available to as a liaison for all of our ambassadors. You can reach out to me and essentially request to bring Chamois Butt'r on as a partner for your group rides. We love getting Chamois Butt'r into the hands of cyclists, and especially new cyclists. And we find that one of the best ways that we can convert a person to a Chamois Butt'r user is to give them that first sample while on an actual ride. So if you, yes, Joanna's got her samples. If you are hosting a group ride, we would love to get some samples to you. Something as simple as like gathering the group up and being like, hey, does anyone need some Chamois Butt'r before we get going? And then if you see that face of like, what is that? Being like, you could go put this on real quick and it'll prevent chafing for the duration of our ride. I highly recommend it if you've never tried it before. It's a game changer, right? That simple touch point goes a very, very long way and actually can like dramatically impact someone's cycling experience. And then we also, we love to provide that little like extra nice touch for you all. So if you'd like to buy post-ride drinks, or maybe you want to get cookies for everyone in the group ride, Chamois Butt'r can usually help you out with that as well.
Okay, does anybody have examples of like a really bad experience that has maybe affected them? Because I think that's something we can all share and we learn from when we kind of pivot our perspective. Anybody want to share something that may have happened that has changed their mind on how they coordinate groups? Hop in.
I've got one.
Hey, Kenneth.
Hey, I'm over here multitasking and cooking dinner. This is kind of, so I lead a weekly social ride for Onyx Coffee in Northwest Arkansas. This was not that ride. And so this was not a gravel ride, so social, kind of around town. If you're going to be making stops like on your ride, please like give people an idea of how long you plan on staying at places. And maybe how long, because like this affected the overall length of the ride, like time wise, not distance wise. And I had a group of friends that I brought on this ride, and they thought the ride started at like 6 or 6:30, and we thought we'd be done around like 8:30. We were done at like almost close to 10. But because we kept we stopped for like food and drinks, mainly drinks, like way too long than the ride leader had suggested. And none of my friends ever went back to that ride, which kind of stinks. That has gotten better since then, but that was probably one of the bad experiences I can think of where I'm like, okay, if you're gonna be social about it and stuff, say, we're gonna spend maybe this amount of time at this place. We plan on being back to the starting point of this ride around this time, and then stick to it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Joanna, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, so my entire scheme for founding the Rochester chapter of the Gravel Collective was based on a really bad group ride that I was on. It was borderline infuriating. I showed up to a shop ride, which those of us who are avid cyclists know a shop ride is typically a slow ride, right? It was an 18-mile-per-hour at the slowest Paceline Hammerfest of me and a bunch of white dudes on carbon fiber road bikes. And a few of my friends who were keeping up with them, and I was way back, were actually angry on my behalf, which was nice to see, but also I didn't like that because it ruined their ride when they saw how miserable I was. I turned around halfway and I was like, I'm done. I can't deal with this anymore. I went home, I got home and I was in tears. It was so upsetting. And I have very thick skin. I work in a male dominated industry. It takes a lot to upset me. And it ruined my day. And
Oh no. Did we lose Joanna? Is everybody else still on?
Yeah,
Oh no.
I think we just lost Joanna.
Well, I think that example is perfect where no one who has a bad experience owes anyone else an explanation, but as simple as just communicating, hey, this is what you should expect, can really go very far for everybody's experience. Oh, Joanna's back.
And my internet dropped randomly. That's weird.
You had us on a cliffhanger. No.
Right. So they apologize profusely. Now their rides are listed as this is a drop ride. Show up for snacks afterwards. We'd love to have you, but here's the pace. It was nice to see that spurred some change with them. And people have asked me since about that ride. I'm like, well, this one time it was really bad, but now they're trying. So it's a little better. Just know what you're in for. Same thing. We've had a ride where it's people want to stop and take a lot of photos. Not everybody wants to. We've split the group up into a more social chill photo ride and a faster, let's just get in and get done ride. So very good point, Kenneth.
Yeah, I don't think there's any spectrum of like whether a ride is good or bad. It's more, I think what we keep repeating if we get into the nuances is how good is your communication? You can have different tiered groups. You can have different length of rides. They're all great if you are communicating well, so that people can make their own decisions. So if you do enough that someone can make a decision of, is this a good fit for me? Yes or no, especially if they're by themselves, if they're new, they might be feeling apprehensive about like their ability to keep up or have fun. Like, as long as we're communicating some basic things, I think that goes really, really far, even with your best friends. So, even with people that I have known really well, and it's maybe two people, I will sometimes say no because I'm a little nervous. Like, hey, and that's on me, right? I'm like, oh, I know they have a little more experience there. I'm a little uncomfortable. But, when we talk about a route or, hey, is there an alternate? Or, hey, I think I might want to take a break. If we talk about it, we usually have a good time. But I think a lot of these examples just come down to kind of like, it's more about communicating for other people to make decisions for themselves versus you. And it's not a good or bad thing, it's just good communication. Does anybody have any questions, or maybe like, hey, I've thought about doing something. How did you go about it? Or another bad example they want to share? We have just a few more minutes left, but if anybody has that little tingling feeling of like, should I ask this? This would be a great time. All right. Well, there's tons of resources online. Joanna listed some. Um, I know when we started hosting group rides with Chamois Butt'r a couple years ago, I personally looked at a bunch of the resources that Joanna provided, especially if you just maybe want to share them with your bike shop. RAR's website is really fantastic. It literally outlines, here's some things you can think about before you go on a bike packing trip, or how to introduce yourself. So I think it's really awesome that everyone is kind of on this call. It indicates that we're mindful of each other. So that's really kind of key to the whole Chamois Butt'r ethos and creating community to make bikes more accessible. So through all of these little actions, I think they add up to more people hopping on a bike, contributing to more great experiences so they stay on a bike. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out to Joanna. She's on Instagram. Beckie has dropped her email in the chat. It's also on the Facebook group. And yeah, feel free to reach out or participate on the Facebook group after this. If you all have suggestions for our next session, we have our next 3 Zoom calls set up. I think the next one is how to winterize your bike, which I think is pretty relevant to most of us. But feel free to let us know if there's anything else we can do to support, whether it's your community, group rides, or just online. Please reach out, be vocal. One of the things that Joanna had said is be open to feedback. So that's what we're trying to do. Okay, well, it's great to see everybody. Thanks for hopping on.
Thank you.
everyone.
Nice seeing everybody tonight.
Thanks, everybody. Good to see some familiar faces.
Thanks, Joanna.
Bye.
Hey,
Bye, guys.
Amanda.